so much going on. This is why we can't do it in like a 4-minute update on
If
Sunday.
somebody's listening to this in 2 times speed, I apologize. Bring it down. I'll be 2 times speed for you.
Well, hey everybody, I am here with David Hawkins. Hey, David.
Hey.
And Josh Armstrong. And hey, Josh.
Hey.
We're going to quiz Josh for a few minutes here about everything that's happening in missions, because there is a lot. And sometimes when I get these updates from Josh, my head is left spinning because there are a lot of things happening in a lot of places all at once. And we're eager to tell everybody in the church about all of those things, but on a Sunday morning to just go through all of the things that are going on would just be dizzying. So we're going to be dizzying on a podcast where you can hit pause and take notes if you want to do it, or keep a running list or something like that. So just real quick here, I'm going to read you guys Acts 1:8. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. There's sort of a 3-tiered framework built into that verse, Josh, that has really governed the way that we do our missions work. Why don't you tell us how that works and how it affects our thinking?
Yeah, we've been looking at that verse for a long time now, missionally, and in the life of our church, and it's really helpful because we talk, with the things that our church runs by and our mottos and our mission statements and all that stuff. So we talk about joining God in the renewal of all things, and we talk about walking with Jesus and loving our neighbor. But Jesus said, yeah, do that. But when you talk about loving your neighbor, do it right where you're at. You're Jerusalem. Do it in the greater region that is around you, your Judea and Samaria, and do it to the ends of the earth. And so this for this podcast, we want to focus a little bit on all 3 of those, but mostly on that third component, which is where I spend a lot of my time in the life of our church, which is helping our church focus on the ends of the earth. Mm-hmm. So I guess just maybe starting with Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Talking a little about that.
To picture the concentric circles maybe around wherever you are, that's your Jerusalem, right? And that's what's happening locally. And then you can picture concentric circles sort of emanating out that ultimately go to the whole world. So we have a responsibility for what's here and now and what's right in front of us, but we also have a responsibility to share the gospel to the ends of the earth, which is kind of an overwhelming thought to be able to. And so that's why we have people like you, Josh, who help us get our heads around that, think biblically about those things, and be on a mission together. So, yeah, just like you said, let's start with Jerusalem. Just give us an update of some of the things we know. I think, obviously, so much of what our church does is a ministry to our immediate community, and so that all counts. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about Sunday mornings and things that we do through groups, and even the other service projects that we're even talking about on this same podcast actually are being discussed. But some of the other things that we may not even know about that are happening locally. So
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think when we talk about our Jerusalem, so much of what we've been encouraging our folks to do is really think about their neighborhoods and their workplaces and their schools, and where are the places that you eat, work, live, and play, and how can you take not only what you're learning on Sunday and in our small groups, but how can your family be mobilized locally? And so we've got lots of families that are doing a lot of cool stuff in their neighborhoods and their workplaces. And one thing we really wanted to highlight, and something we've been attempting to do in different ways for years now, is really partnering with some Hispanic leaders in our local area here in Blount County and even beyond into Knox County. We've got folks from both Springbrook and Maryville campuses that are doing that, and we've got some really cool partners that are working in some interesting places, including places like Grayson Apartments over in Alcoa, where there's just a lot of persons of peace being identified and spiritual conversations happening, and which is really, really cool. I also, just being the missions guy, I get to talk to folks all the time who are living out their faith locally. One of the things I'm really excited about right here, going on right here in Maryville, is there just seems to be something really stirring in Maryville College campus, and in partnerships that we have with organizations like FCA. And we've got one young guy that just started coming here recently, and I'm just excited to see what God's doing in his life as he's getting involved in the church, and he's starting to bring some of his college friends here, but how they're really thinking about taking it to their campus. And so we could give lots of examples, but honestly, rather than talk about examples, I'm excited about how our church is positioning ourselves to think about loving our neighbor right where we're at. And I think Jerusalem is going to increasingly become a focus of our church, not just on a Sunday experience, and that's been true for a long time. But I think we're getting more mobilized to reach our neighborhoods and the places that we're already in.
I think it's inevitable, man. Like, people are increasingly walking with Jesus, and if you're genuinely walking with Jesus, you will love your neighbor. It's this sort of irrepressible thing. It's going to come forward as you are walking with Jesus. He's going to stir and challenge, and you're going to find purpose and calling and meaning in the people around you, and say, I should be doing something about the ways in which they may be hurting, or the ways in which the things that they don't yet know about life with Jesus. And it's going to be increasingly be this inevitable overflow of the fact that people are doing the left foot, right foot every day with Jesus. If you're following him, he's going to lead you to your neighbors more and more. And I think we're already starting to see it bubble up. I'm really excited about some things churning a bit at Maryville College. Those are words I've been waiting to hear for quite a while.
Yeah, man, I'm excited too.
Yeah. And then, okay, so maybe if we go broaden out a little bit, the next concentric circle in Judea and Samaria, or to stick with that same sort of visual there. Anything that kind of stands out in that role or in that area that you want to highlight now?
Yeah, I think I know that on this podcast you already, I think, have featured and will be featuring some folks in our church that are working alongside existing organizations, both here in our county and even some of the surrounding counties. I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing some strategic partnerships. I hope to see a lot more of that. One thing I've always really loved about our church is I feel like we're a friend. This sounds funny, but we're a friend with a lot of other churches in the area. I think the Vineyard's had a real favor with other ministry leaders. And so I think I really feel like we play well with other churches, if that makes sense. And I shouldn't even have to say that, but unfortunately, a lot of times in churches, especially here in the Bible Belt, that's not always the case. And so I think in Judea and Samaria, God's given us real favor with other ministry partners and churches. I'm seeing that a lot. I'm seeing us partnering with some organizations out in Knoxville. I think about Springbrook, how they've been connecting with people like Will Boggs out in Knoxville, and he's got this unbelievable ministry called Raising a Voice that they've partnered with. I mentioned, we've partnered with people like Young Life and FCA, and really I think the heart for our church with Judea and Samaria is that we do try to unify with the greater body around East Tennessee. And so I think we're going to continue to do that, and we've got some cool things churning in that. So, yeah. And
you're working with collections of leaders in like 3 different areas, right? Sort of in Knoxville area, Tri-Cities area, Chattanooga area.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot to that, a lot of moving pieces, and that is different expressions in different places. But the point is, you're using your sort of catalytic leadership gift to get leaders together, talking about meaningfully connecting with and reaching people for Jesus all around East Tennessee, right?
For sure. And one of the things I love about our church is I think we love the Vineyard, but we're willing to play well with a lot of different people that are, anybody that's about the ministry of the kingdom. We fly that kingdom flag way higher than any other flag, including even the Vineyard, and we love the Vineyard. Sure. And so, we're partnering with some cool people up in the Tri-Cities and in Knoxville, and really hoping to just reach out and have influence in other counties, whether or not they ever know the Vineyard's a part of that or not. And so I think that's the real heart behind our church.
And then even beyond that, and this is a little bit more connected to you and your ministry with VUSA, but you're in a couple of roles with VUSA. We'll get to the international stuff, but there's some domestic stuff that you're doing with VUSA missions as well. Can you give us a quick rundown on what you're doing with that? Yeah,
it's a good transition into the international stuff, which again is probably what we'll spend most of our time talking about, because with VUSA, I'm involved in 2 roles with the Vineyard USA's missions team, and so one of those is 100% related to international work. I'm the regional coordinator for Africa for VUSA, but then also stepped into a role earlier this year, which I love, and I think it's just producing a lot of fruit already, and that's a role that was created coming out of the Vineyard's reorg that they did. And so it's kind of a pretentious title. It's the Missions Mobilization Coordinator, the MMC. I'll expect everybody to remember that.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I've been told that. By the way, I've been told that title like 20 times. I've already forgotten it.
Oh man, I can hardly remember it, and it's my title, man. But yeah, so the whole premise behind it is for me to be able to help churches in 3 different regions, 3 of the 9 regions in the United States, help them mobilize into mission. And so we have a lot of young churches, a lot of church plants, and a lot of churches just struggling coming out of COVID, all this stuff. And really kind of circling the wagons and saying, hey, how are you thinking in these 3 spheres, Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, and ends of the earth? But particularly, what's your church looking at in terms of ends of the earth, and how can you partner together? And so we're seeing tons of churches right now just step into mission, and I just think it's going to produce huge dividends in the long run.
Man, I'll just tell you as a pastor who's been there, for a church that doesn't have an established missions, like international missions focus, it's really intimidating to try to think about how to even get started. And this goes back way like years and years ago when essentially, it came down to you feeling called and being called to Haiti, and then that helped set us on a course. But for years, it's hard to look at an entire globe and think, okay, we know this is part of God's calling. Where do we even begin? And it was for years for us, it's really overwhelming until the Lord directed it. But this role that you're doing, I just think it's really important to go to churches who maybe don't have a Josh Armstrong sitting in the seats, to say, hey, here's actually some really clear steps that you can take. Here's places where there's need, where you can make a real difference, and getting churches involved. And because I'm telling you, these churches want to get involved. It's just hard to know how. And the fact that you're helping them do it, I'm excited about it because honestly, it's what you did for us. And we've seen so much fruit in our international missions work, and if the path hadn't been made clear to us, we might still be spinning our wheels all these years later. So,
well, before we go to the next part, I just want to say to that, I tell people all the time that when I'm outside of East Tennessee and talking about the Vineyard and what I do and all that, I always brag on you and Sharon. I'm like, man, Aaron and Sharon really had the guts to say, hey, we're going to free somebody up to be, the language I remember you using at the time was things like, our resident missionary or whatever, just freed up to hear from the Lord and then help our church kind of go in that direction. And a guy wired like me, I was so just blown away that I would have that opportunity, and it's been a blessing, man. And I think, it has produced fruit because, not a lot of senior leaders, I think, take a risk to do that, especially with a crazy wild card like myself, I suppose. So, so thanks. Way to go, man.
Yeah, I think that clarifies. That like a lot of people may not really even know, like, what exactly does Josh do?
My wife asked that all the time.
As a missions pastor, is like, is he just traveling on the church's dime? Like, how's that work? I don't think anybody thinks that, but you are a full-time missionary. And you live domestically, but that's because you're a catalyst, or you're a catalyzing, whatever the word is, works in so many different places, both through our church and through Vineyard USA, that this is basically your hub, your home base, but you're gone a lot. And you're gone in places that we are as a church actively involved in, and in lots of other places, especially in Africa, that we're not actively involved in, but you're facilitating it for other churches. And
well, the world's changed so much. There's still certainly a need for long-term missionaries, and there will always be a need for that. But there's not. I don't think there's a need for as many, at least coming out of the United States, literally living for the rest of their lives. Maybe for a season, but we live in a smaller world now in so many ways. And so the ability to go in and raise up indigenous leaders, which I think is in the long run more fruitful if you can do it. And so, being able to be based out of here, supported by our church and empowered and given the resources and tools we need. It's been really great, man. I think I'm starting to see some other churches some light bulbs come on and say, oh man, we should do that too. Like some version of that. So
All right, so give us a scoop, man. Ends of the earth, international missions. What's happening?
Yeah, we'll start. So, just a quick history for those who don't know about our church's involvement internationally, and there's a little bit preceding Haiti, but certainly when Haiti came on our radar back in 2011. We actually had, a connection through one of our through a guy who was our youth pastor at the time, and connection to a ministry down there. My wife and I were really thinking we'd go to Africa. We were really feeling drawn to that, and we ended up getting redirected to the African diaspora in Haiti. And so we, lived there for a few years. On our way out, another couple from our church, who a lot of listeners will know, Daniel and Natalie Abercrombie and their 2 kids, came in, moved into Haiti for about 6 years, and continued one of the works that's going on in Haiti that our church helped catalyze. So that happened, and then we started doing some work in West Africa. But I'll talk about West Africa in a little bit. Let's just start with Haiti. I'll touch on a few things and pause and see if David's not been at our church too long, a couple of years now, and so probably knows less about our work in Haiti than Africa even. So feel free to say, hey, tell me more about that.
Absolutely.
But the quick rundown of Haiti is we've got several ministries that we continue to partner with that are mostly run by indigenously led teams, so Haitians. And so one of the things I'm the most passionate about is called Simple Church Ministries, and that is essentially a disciple-making movement that started with my good friend Gabriel Lindor and his leadership team of Haitians. When we lived there, we helped Gabriel kind of get that off the ground, and he's taken it and run with it. And now there are just scores of leaders and literally over 1,000 groups, or some people even call them churches. We refer to them as simple churches, meet in homes under trees, in schools. They blanket the map of Haiti. So if you look at a map of Haiti and put your finger almost anywhere on the map, you're going to find one of those simple churches, and it's a multiplicative disciple-making movement that's taking place there. And so we continue to help support them. They're doing great. Another quick thing I should say about Haiti before going to the next ministry is it's maybe a lot of the listeners know it was the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere before the earthquake in 2010. Earthquake happens, things are even worse. Corruption and poverty is just rampant, and now even the last couple of years, the gang violence and political. The president was assassinated. It is just a hot mess. And in the middle of all that, this Simple Church Ministries continues to go forward. And these very brave, mostly young, but not exclusively young men and women are pushing this thing forward. And so that's an awesome thing. That's the ministry I maybe get the most excited about.
Yeah, so the scope of that is wild. So over 1,000 groups of people, some small, some large.
Best estimates are about 1,300, actually.
1,300. Wow. That number's gone up.
Yeah.
1,300 groups of people that represent just thousands and thousands of new converts, right? People who did not know Jesus and been baptized through the ministry of that outreach. That's just absolutely remarkable. That's really exceptional.
Yeah.
It's exciting, man.
Well, and the cool story, and I'll go into this more here in a little bit when we talk about Africa, but Gabriel actually went from there and helped launch some stuff in West Africa with me. He went on my first trip there when we started exploring what God was doing. So he's just an incredible young guy. He's only 31, 32 years old. And Gabe now has also helped pioneer some stuff on the other side of the island of Hispaniola. So Haiti shares Hispaniola with the Dominican Republic. And so now there's simple churches over in the DR as well. I'll actually be there late October to see some of that. So
yeah.
Really cool stuff. Yeah, so and another ministry that, so when we lived in Haiti, we had bought land up in a really remote part of the country, beautiful part of the country called the Forest of the Pines, or in French it's Forêt des Pins. And we knew that God was calling us to put a clinic in that area. The healthcare, people were dying of just, stupid stuff, unnecessary things. And we said, man, there's a real need there, and that can be an incredible access ministry to advance the gospel, but also just to be the hands and feet of Jesus and meet practical needs. Well, we really were feeling called to go to unreached people groups and move back to the States and start working in Africa. And I said, oh, man, I don't know how we're going to get that pulled off. And lo and behold, one of the last team trips we ever did had a guy named Daniel Abercrombie on it. He'd never been to Haiti. He and his wife had pretty good jobs, had a comfortable life, couple of kids here in the States, and he went up to Fred A. Penn with me, saw the need, heard the need. He's got a little bit of a medical background, and he was like, he said something that people say to me all the time. We're coming down this mountain. I'm driving. He's in the seat beside me, and he's like, Josh, I think I need to get our family to move here and start that clinic that you guys had a heart for. And I was like, yeah, as you say, rolled the eyes of my heart. I hear you say that all the time here. Yeah. I was like, yeah, I've heard that before. People on this high. And I mean, it was like 2 or 3 months later.
But Daniel
they were on the way.
Just say stuff.
No.
See, if you'd have known Daniel really well at that point, you'd have been like, oh man, he's going to do that.
100%.
He's one of the few. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And so, man, a few months later, they had sold their stuff, raised some support, and went and launched it. And now they built up a clinic, and they kind of took over the operations of that. They were working with another organization, and they started to see the need to start their own organization. And transition that clinic under an organization that they created, which is called Access Health Alliance, or AHA. AHA. Yep, that's good marketing right there. And we need to edit that out of the podcast, by the way.
It's staying in.
I tell you what, man, the last 6 years, them living there, they just recently moved back for a couple of reasons, but they continue to drive that ministry forward while being here from the States, kind of like we did. But that they have seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients, met the needs of so many people, delivered so many babies, prevented, frankly, quite a few deaths just over things that were unnecessary by getting this clinic off the ground, getting preventative health care going. And so
actually, I just pulled up their website, which is Access HA for healthalliance.org. And just right here on their homepage, 25,000 medical consultations, 70,000 plus prescriptions that were filled. And this is in a place where there was just, I can't stress it enough, there was absolutely zero access to any sort of medical help. There wasn't any, like from miles and miles in any direction. Is that right? I mean, that's not hyperbole.
No, there were some Mennonites that had a clinic it was about 45 minutes away, and it ended up going under. So there was an even greater need. So I mean, you had nothing. People were prone to die on their way down the mountain because they were so far away from healthcare.
Gosh, and they've delivered over 100 babies, which I don't think they were planning on that part. It just ended up happening. It's like, oh, guess we do this now.
A very fertile region, evidently. So they're taking care of business.
It's just an incredible ministry, man, and the Abercrombies are amazing.
Yeah. And then, just a couple more things on Haiti I'll touch on. So my wife would kill me if I didn't mention the Freedom House. And so we had, without really meaning to, started what became a children's home. But the Freedom House was a ministry for restavig, which is a Haitian term that means to stay with. It's indentured servanthood, but that's a nice way of saying child slavery, kids that were just in really, really bad shape. And there was a particular region that we started working in, which I'll talk more about in just a second, called La Bourde, which is by far the poorest area I've personally been to in Haiti. It's just it's a mess in terms of poverty. But we saw a need there, and then in some other places through Simple Church Ministry and some other things we were involved with around the country, where kids were living in this lifestyle. They essentially their parents had either died or couldn't take care of them, and so the kids were given to somebody in the community or a family member, but they weren't given access to school or the same clothes, food, anything like that. They were basically living as a slave in the houses, and that's a tradition that's passed over from West Africa. There's a whole history behind that. And so we took some kids in that were in really bad shape because they weren't getting health care, weren't being taken care of. One of the kids we took in, we were planning to take his brother also, and about 2 weeks before they were set to come to this house that we had started, his brother died, and so didn't make it. Just malnutrition and a whole plethora of other problems and health issues. So started the Freedom House. That ministry has really turned into just a beautiful, incredible thing.
Yes, it has.
It's transitioning away from being a traditional children's home and into more of both a transitional program for teenagers and young adults, because there's a huge problem in Haiti of kids that are in orphanages, both getting involved in either trafficking or just leaving those institutions and there being nothing for them. And so the Freedom House is turning into more of a transitional and family empowerment type ministry. And we just recently moved that ministry up to Cap Haitian. And so in Haiti, there are 2 international airports. There's Port-au-Prince, which is a mess because of the gang violence, and then there's Cap Haitian in the north. And we were just recently able to move the Freedom House to Cap Haitian in the north for their safety, and they're doing great. They're thriving. And so we're really excited about that.
Yeah.
And so just one other thing about Haiti is love to talk just real quickly about Laborde. Laborde is that region I was talking about. It's in the central plateau of Haiti. And Laborde, like I said, first time I ever went there, it's miles and miles up and down these huge mountains. It's only goat trails, no roads back there. And a friend of mine told me about it and said, hey, this is a really rough area, really poor area, and we need to try to do something to help the folks in that area. And so we ended up hiking back there, barely made it, thought I was going to die. And sure enough, we got there and there was only literally voodoo temples and shacks where tons of just desperate, poor people live.
Yeah.
And we since then have been able to plant a church, start a school that's thriving. There was no schools in the area, and so now a couple of hundred kids that weren't getting an education are getting one.
Amazing.
Daniel came in one time with me and started implementing some preventative health care in the region, and especially for pregnant ladies, things they needed. Got shoes in there, all kinds of stuff. Built a latrine system so that there, just did a lot of things. And so now that area, we've kind of taken on and sponsored that area, if you will.
Yeah.
A lot of beautiful things happening. And there's actually some surrounding simple churches that have come out of the church that was planted in that area.
It.
So
yeah,
a lot of cool stuff in Haiti, man.
Yeah, that's where the water project we worked on with Must Have Gifts was as well, right?
Yeah. For those who participated in Must Have Gifts last year, one of the things we did was in partnership with an organization called Lima, which essentially they have a solar powered generator that also can pump water in really remote places, and so it can provide electricity and water in places that are kind of off the grid, which Laborde certainly is. And so our church actually raised money to send one of the units. The Freedom House bought one of the units, so we're going to send one to the Freedom House. It's actually being shipped there and should be there this week, I believe.
Oh, great.
But both of those units,
get stuff there.
Yeah. Well, one of the units is going to go to the Freedom House. We're going to train a team there at the Freedom House how to assemble it, and then we're going to pack up the other unit and take it via donkey up and over those mountains to Laborde.
Oh, my goodness.
And it'll be the first time that area has ever had. At least a lot of the houses and the school there is going to get electricity and running water. And so,
beautiful, redemptive work, man.
Yeah, it's exciting.
I love it. All right, so Africa.
Oh, man.
There's a lot going on, man. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, again, just to give a very brief history, when we were coming back from Haiti, we really felt called to unreached people groups, which and we didn't know what that might look like, but that through that's a longer story. But just some honestly dreams and visions and things that God was stirring around in my heart. Really said, man, unreached people groups, 1040 window, which that's the place on planet Earth that contains the most unreached people groups. It basically stretches from West Africa through the Middle East and through Southeast Asia. And there are literally thousands of people groups on planet Earth that still don't have access to the gospel of Jesus. And so we said, man, what can we do to make a little dent in what that looks like? And the focus, through a series of events, the focus got narrowed to Africa, which got narrowed to West Africa, which got narrowed to the Ivory Coast, or in French, it's Côte d'Ivoire. And we did an exploratory trip there just a few months after we moved back from Haiti. Took my buddy Gabe with me, and we set off for a couple of weeks and just went all over the country praying and meeting people. And that turned into a few other trips that turned into identifying some key leaders, that turned into identifying the first people group we started working with, which is the Ouagadougou people. It's a people group of a couple 100,000 people, Muslim and Muslim animist background people. And so we launched a 5-year project with the Ouagadougou people in which we wanted to, at the end of that, see self-governance, self-sustainability, and self-propagation. Self-propagation meaning that disciples and churches were made out of that people group rather than a guy like me rolling in and, and planting a church. So indigenously led church planting and disciple making movement. And it happened.
So basically that means sustaining in all the ways without influence from, or without money or input from the West, from us.
We pumped training and coaching and mentoring and money and a few other resources into that people group over a 5-year period. And our church actually, our local church here did that and was a part of that. With the hope that after 5 years there would be an exit strategy in place, and that exit strategy ended in December of 2021, and we did it.
It worked.
It worked.
Unbelievable.
Just
do you have any? No, I know the numbers are bonkers. Do you know any of them?
Last count, I was just with that people group because here in a minute I'll go on to tell how we're now working with a lot of other people groups, not only in Cote d'Ivoire but other countries. But just that people group, there are, we believe, something like 8,000 people that would consider themselves disciples. Wow. There are several hundred, and we're not exactly sure of the number. We know the number is around 1,000 groups, and you can call them churches. We don't call them churches. They don't call them churches because of persecution and things like that, because it's a Muslim area. But we can't really track just how much it's multiplied out. We do know our best estimate is that it's to the 13th generation, although I recently heard that it might be to the 14th and even 15th generation. And so when I say that, what I mean to say is we started with a first generation group of people we trained. They went and made disciples in their social networks and with persons of peace in their social networks. And then those people, when they became discipled of Jesus, went one generation further into their social networks. And so,
and these groups are just meeting, studying the Bible.
They're doing lots of things. They're meeting, they're studying the Bible. They're finding out what the needs of their communities are and meeting them in their villages. They're exploring different versions of worship, what worship looks like. So it's not necessarily from the stage with a sound system, that kind of thing. It's what does worship look like contextualized for them and their culture. So they're doing all kinds of cool things, man. But above all, they're learning what does it mean to be an obedient follower of Jesus that gives away what they're learning. And so one of cool stories of literally imams, which are kind of like Muslim preachers, sharing stories that they heard in their tribe by some new disciple, sharing it in the mosque and saying, Isa said this. I heard this story about Isa, which is Arabic for Jesus. And Jesus is, a lot of people don't know this, but Jesus is mentioned, I think, over 60 times in the Quran. And so, so imams literally talking about some of the stories that they heard from the Gospels. They heard these in these discovery Bible studies that they're in their villages, and they thought they were so cool. They were like, "Oh, people in my mosque would love this story."
Wow, that's amazing.
And now, what's so cool, man, is like out of some of the kind of catalytic leaders that emerged in that first unreached people group. We identified some kind of national leaders to kind of develop the Vineyard in Cote d'Ivoire as people groups were being engaged. And so we've got this leadership team in Cote d'Ivoire that's helped kind of giving order and governance to the whole thing. And now there are multiple unreached people groups in Cote d'Ivoire that have a work going on. That's not all coming from our church. Our church kind of helped catalyze that, but we partner with other Vineyard churches, mostly in the United States, that have helped give support to those things. And so, and now that has bled over into Mali, and we actually have some inroads into some other countries. And so West Africa is just one of the coolest places to be involved with Vineyard missions right now.
So that's in how many, I might put you on the spot here, but how many of these unreached people groups are being engaged on some level right now?
We have 6 in Cote d'Ivoire, and we have 2 in Mali. That's where formal work is happening. I don't want to do some kind of preacher thing, and you would never do this, Aaron, and embellish. But I will say
that personally.
But I will say that work has spilled over to some surrounding people groups because there's cross pollination. It's not like, especially in some of the cities, there's not more than one people group. And so, but there are 6 in Cote d'Ivoire that are directly being engaged, like intentionally being engaged.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's incredible, man.
So that's a little bit of Africa. We've got some other cool projects that we've been a part of there and are doing there. And then I think our church has been given real favor with the greater Vineyard in terms of involvement in Africa, really the whole continent. And part of that's because of the role that I'm able to serve on with Vineyard Missions as the regional coordinator for Africa. But we're really taking what we're learning in West Africa and a lot of other partnerships that the Vineyard has in Africa are paying attention and saying, man, how can we contextualize that for where we're at? And so we don't just want to go in and, build a building. Like, a lot of the more traditional approaches to doing mission work cross-culturally or internationally is let's go in and build a building and kind of be the mother church and help them get off the ground. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but we said, okay, what's it going to take to reach a whole people group? Well, coming in and building a building and training up a pastor or two is probably not going to get the job
If you're
done.
wanting to reach hundreds of thousands of people, you can't think in terms of square feet and
we use that term.
Pastor.
We use that term gospel saturation. What would it mean? And when we say that term, it's what would it mean for every man, woman, boy, and child in this people group to have multiple opportunities to see, hear, and respond to the good news of Jesus? And how do we help foster that by raising up indigenous leaders, not by coming in and doing crusades or anything like that? That's just not really our jam.
I think we've hit most of the highlights here, man. I'll give you a minute to think to see if there are other things you want to get us up to speed on. But I was going to ask specifically about some of the stuff we've done with business startups and
thank you.
And then anything else I might be missing.
Golly, we could talk forever about all this stuff. I'm trying to, sorry for the listeners. I'm like rapping through this.
There's so much going on. This is why we can't do it in like a 4-minute update on
If
Sunday.
somebody's listening to this in 2 times speed, I apologize. Bring it down. I'll be 2 times speed for you. So in terms of business endeavors, we've done some stuff in Haiti. I won't touch too much on that. Let's just talk specifically in Africa. I mentioned a big goal that we have is the kind of the 3 selves. So it's self-propagation. We want to see a church planting movement that comes out of the place where, or the people right where they're at, indigenously led church planting or disciple making movement, and at which point it will be self-propagating. And we talked about self-governance. We don't have any desire to govern people overseas. That's called colonization. You just look at, do a little historical digging over the last few hundred years, and you'll see some icky stuff. We
doesn't always
don't
go
want
great.
to do that. It doesn't go great. We don't want to be the great American heroes, but rather we want to raise up and empower leaders that can reach their people in their country more effectively. But then we talk about self-sustainability, and so we don't, we give some seed money and some startup money with the hopes and goals that churches and even Christian businesses in the countries that we're working in can help sustain the work that's being done there. That's hard in a place like Africa, and it's even harder in some of the poorest countries of Africa. Ivory Coast has some very poverty-stricken parts to it, especially in the north. But the south, you can be creative and make some money there. And so, a few years ago, about 3.5 years ago, actually, we said, hey, what if we provided some seed money, and we provided some accountability through our partnership here in the States, but we really gave a lot of leeway to the indigenous board in the Ivory Coast to help oversee and provide accountability for some seed money that could go to some business projects that could help with the overhead of building a vineyard church when I say building a vineyard church, I don't mean a building, building the structure and the necessary things to see the vineyard Côte d'Ivoire thrive. And so we sowed money about 3.5 years ago, and we gave quite a bit of money the first year and given a little bit less every year as they start to develop and have sustainability in the country. So we've done things like buying land in order to build some projects on, and buying land in places where urban sprawl is going out. And so the land will, be worth a lot more after a few years, in order just for the church there to have a little bit of wealth and be able to sell that, or to build something on it if they wanted to, housing, whatever the case may be. We've done pig farms. Pig farms has actually been a really cool thing, and provided quite a bit of money. We've done motorcycle services. We've done concrete block services, businesses. Gosh, I'm forgetting some stuff. We've done quite a few things. We tried to diversify so that, we're not naive enough to think that one or two of those businesses is probably either not going to go well or maybe even not work at all.
Yeah.
And so we really gave some African business leaders that we started to meet in Africa, in Cote d'Ivoire, some leeway to be able to use that money and have good accountability systems in place.
Yeah, but
so
they
that
know
could
their
explore.
context better than we do, obviously.
100%.
So what makes sense to you in that place? And so then they've taken that and seeing some fruit come from it.
Yeah, 100%.
Man, there's so much stuff that's happening. I'm so fired up about what God's doing. And it's really, I've said it a bunch of times. It's not unprecedented, but it's almost unprecedented. I'm really, really grateful that we get to be a part of it, man. Thanks so much for coming and giving us the big mega update on all that God's doing.
Yeah, and hit me up if you're listening to this and want to know more about any of these things that we talked about, or maybe just have a heart for missions. I love talking about that stuff. So, one other quick thing. We got a team trip in March.
Yep.
I think it's just about filled up. And so if you're listening to this, you could at least reach out to me. Get my email on the website, or it's what is my
Josh
at
vineyardchurch.us. Josh at our website.
We'll put it in the show. We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, but yeah, you can reach out to me and find out. We're going to the Dominican Republic because and we're going to work with some Haitian leaders in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for that is Haiti's just too dangerous to take a team trip to right now. And so if you're interested in that, hit me up, and that's coming in March.
I love it. All right, Josh, thank you so much, man.
Thank you guys for all you do.
Yeah, thanks.